today, I really wanted to talk on sodium. Sodium intake in foods and the recommended daily allowance and just a general scope on sodium. And it's actually got a little bit of a bad rap as far as too much sodium is going to be, you're going to be at risk of this and, you know, blood pressure problems and heart issues. Sodium is essential for bodily function. Everything from heart to blood volume to cell structure and function. It has such a big job, but what happens is that with a lot of the studies that have been done with sodium, it's been high sodium intakes were also connected with people on high calorie intakes, high fat intakes, and when you start breaking down the data, you find that there's no real how could you say, connection as far as sodium being detrimental for the body, bar those who are, you know, obviously a free-for-all calorie intake and just no structure or guidance. And that's where a lot of the studies associated with sodium intake had probably given sodium a bit of a bad rap. But the other thing too is that a lot of people automatically think, oh, you know, I can't have sodium, I'm going to hold fluid, I'm going to put on weight. And, you know, that's the whole, how do you say, the vibe that's connected with sodium as a whole. And I've experienced this as well. You know, being on, I wasn't even sourcing my foods back in the day because I was worried about the whole sodium thing and holding fluid, and it's actually quite the opposite. Now, the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, is about 2,400 milligrams of sodium a day, which is, I mean, it's not much. It's not heaps, but it's not low as far as a proper intake, as far as you know, keeping the body regular, as far as what it requires to do certain bodily functions as far as sodium as a whole. But the very interesting thing that happens, and this is all good and said in the general community, but also in the bodybuilding community as well, is that if you don't eat enough sodium on a daily basis and you drop sodium out, the body self-regulates and the kidneys don't excrete as much sodium as it would normally, because sodium is so closely tied into blood pressure and the heart, etc. So the body has a very, very close monitor on sodium levels within the body. So if you actually eat less sodium, your body will excrete less. If you eat more sodium, or you consume more sodium on a daily basis, your kidneys will excrete more. So there's this whole regulational process that happens. But what I'm trying to say is that if you underdo sodium, there's actually a hormone called aldosterone in your body that triples within a few days. And it actually makes you hold on to fluid and look a lot more fluidy and hold on to water. So
that's released when you don't have enough sodium? Or
when you don't have enough sodium, the body self-detects this straight away, and a hormone gets excreted called aldosterone. And its job is to basically conserve and prevent the body excreting sodium, and as a result as well, you end up looking more fluidy as such. So what ends up happening is that over a few days, if you are consuming a high sodium diet, over a few days your body will then self-regulate and learn how to excrete enough sodium to what's coming in. So when you're consistent with your sodium intake as well, your body will end up regulating over a couple of days, and your sodium levels will end up balancing itself out anyway. So what happens to a person that goes out and eats a meal that is high in sodium on the weekend, that is used to having a high sodium intake on a daily basis, the weight fluctuation and the fluid retention is not as prevalent or not as noticeable, and the body's used to regulating as such. Whereas if you've got people that aren't consuming enough salt or enough sodium on a daily basis, and they go out and consume a high sodium meal, as a result the weight fluctuations can be quite considerably noticeable, as in, you know, up to a couple of kilos as well, in fluid retention. And because of this is where the whole actually bad rap on sodium is just going to help you hold fluid and I'm going to put on weight or I'm going to hold fluid due to my sodium intake as well. So what I'm trying to say is the body just likes consistency. So if you're consistent at consuming a reasonable intake of sodium, again, I'm sometimes around that 5 to 7 to 8,000 milligrams a day, and my body's used to it, and it's the leanest I've ever been as far as that consumption. And when I go and have a high sodium meal, it doesn't even affect me. Whereas if I was on really low sodium, I would be affected and my weight levels would fluctuate quite considerably. But my body's used to a good considerable intake. I salt and sauce every single meal. And my body's used to that consistency as well, because sodium is an essential and critical ingredient as far as the body's regulatory processes, blood volume, cell structure and function. And also sodium is very, very important because it helps with the transporter to chuck carbs inside your muscles. All right. So if you're not eating enough sodium, your ability to store glycogen or stored carbohydrates or stored energy is not as effective either. So what I'd basically say is that just choose something that works for you on a regular basis. Know that if you are going to jack your sodium levels up that little bit further, you probably might notice it the first day or so, but then it'll balance out and you'll find that your weight levels will sort of start to even out as well. So don't be scared that it's going to be a long-term thing if you're not used to having a high salty meal for once, or that cheat meal as such. So I dare I say, sodium, again, some people are used to consuming quite a considerable amount on a daily basis. The only people with blood pressure problems and issues with the kidneys, they will know as far as that. It's 5 to 10% of the population that should just be wary as far as their daily sodium intake. But apart from that, sodium will not. If you actually don't consume enough, that's when you'll end up holding a lot more fluid as well. So keeping it consistent. Again, the recommended daily allowance is around that 2,500 milligrams a day. But again, I'm around that 5 to 7,000 milligrams a day, and again, it's not affecting me on a body fat level or performance. If anything, it's helping with blood flow, blood volume, and performance as a whole.
Yeah, cool. I actually had a question yesterday. It's funny that that's your topic. What should I do with sodium this weekend if I want to look my best at the beach? That was my question yesterday.
Yeah. And
just from previous talks with you, I just said keep it consistent. Don't make any drastic changes.
Yeah.
Just from what you've told me before. So would you stand by that, or
keep the water up? Yeah. Keep the sodium regular. Don't change a thing
when
you start.
The other thing was water. She's been having 9 litres a day because she's heard that's what we do in heat week, but she hasn't been dieting or anything. So I just said, just be consistent. So 4 litres a day. So just nice and high. Keep your sodium the same. It's not comp prep or anything. It's just the beach.
The worst thing to flatten you out and make you hold fluid is reduce your fluid intake and reduce your sodium intake. If you've been consistent with those variables on a daily basis, you changing those and reverting, your body's basically going to go into a survival state where you're going to be more likely to hold fluid and look terrible for it. So as far as sodium and water variables, I just say keep it as consistent as possible. If you're already looking good, there's not much you can change within a few day period. It's like people want to get shredded and lose 7 kilos in 7 days, and I mean, at the end of the day, if you're looking good already, don't start messing with those variables, especially if you've got some sort of event on the weekend. And just be consistent. The body likes consistency, and it's very good at regulating its sodium levels within the blood sodium levels. And if you don't consume enough, your body will release that anti-diuretic hormone that will actually make you hold and retain fluid as well.
Yeah, cool.
So the first things first is that know that if you do start salting your meals and be consistent with it, maybe the first day or so, that you'll experience that sort of weight increase, but then you'll find it'll come back down and balance itself.
So same with drops. If you drop, will you experience the same? Or?
If you drop, yeah, it normally takes a good couple of days for your body to regulate itself, but I wouldn't go too low, because that's when the body tends to go in a survival state where it will actually hold on to more fluid in the process as well. So,
all right, cool.